Morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Good evening to those of you in the EU and the Far East. We got people all over the world. It's growing all the time. One of the things I'm learning doing this is how strange a place the internet is. And it seems quite clear to me that a lot of people will watch, and it probably goes for other artists and channels as well, but they'll watch to see what they disagree with, and then they'll take away that. And it's a little discouraging sometimes, because the overall message I want to convey here is a love of this music. And if you don't agree with my politics, my social values, my take on the avant-garde, I think it gets lost in there, the underlying message of this music is valuable and worth loving. And I don't hate the avant-garde. There's some of it I listen to quite a lot. I've said it's not essential and it's not for everybody. And a lot of the people who are making it out like, if you don't like avant-garde, you don't like jazz, they're wrong. That's a lot of the avant-garde isn't going to be for everybody any more than a triple imperial barley wine oatmeal stout is going to be for every palate. And I think there's a lot of pressure from the social media, jazz circles, and online reviewers to make people feel like they have to be obligated to like Ornette Coleman, Charles Mingus, Pharoah Saunders, and it only gets even more out in the late 60s and 70s. The out stuff stays so far out. But you don't have to love Cecil Taylor. And if it's not your thing, you can feel that you're allowed to be honest and say so. That's what I've been trying to say to people. Don't feel like you have to. I got a whisker sticking in my lip there. I want people to be able to feel free to say how they honestly feel and what they do like and what they don't care for. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't like out. And I know a lot of people have said to me that they are appreciative of me almost giving them that license, but a lot of other people get so indignant about it. And like I said, I listened to avant-garde almost exclusively for 10 years as a jazz guy. And I've grown into the other aspects of it. And what I've always trying to encourage people is there's so much more beyond what's being promoted by the vinyl community. And a lot of why that vinyl community stuff is being shared is because a lot of that stuff is so rare because it didn't sell well. It was on small labels that don't have a large footprint. And so when someone finds some rare ass ESP or just rare title from a rare label, they want to show it off. But it does create this echo chamber where people think these are the essentials of the jazz canon. And again, they're a sequel to a film that doesn't even necessarily relate to the original film. You can watch it in and of itself. A bit like some of the Star Wars films they're doing now that are not really part of the same trajectory. You could watch the Solo film and not have to see Empire Strikes Back, Jedi, and all that. The avant-garde is its own little episode. But there's no one that should ever make you feel like you have to love it. And if you love it, me saying that other people don't have to love it shouldn't bother you so much. No one is forcing anybody to spend $200 on that record. And if you really love it, that's great. And I'm sure there is a good percentage of people who do really love Cecil Taylor unit structures, but I'm also sure there's a bunch of people who love it because they feel like they're supposed to. And I know the same is true for Bitches Brew. I've had dozens, if not hundreds of people tell me that, man, I'm glad you told me that I don't have to love Bitches Brew because I felt like I had to, and I listened to it 10 times and I didn't get it. I'm like, you don't have to. There's so much great music in jazz that needs to be promoted and loved. And again, that's my underlying message here is the love of this music. And if you only love it for the collectability of it and the resale if you only love it for the virtuosity and the swinging hipster feel it gives you, and if you don't want to factor in the social and economic climate and culture that this music was birthed in, that's fine. As long as you love it, that's great. Because I think some of the message is going to be sinking in regardless. Not everybody who has "the Lord as my shepherd, I shall not want" on their wall grasps the suffering that birthed that. See what I'm saying? And so it's still great to have that on your wall, even if you don't get that. It's still a great thing to have it. It's a great piece of comfort, and jazz does that. It does comfort. It does give us a warm, safe place. And Miles Davis is the other thing where I think people have taken away my negatives and been so turned off by that they've dismissed the channel or all the positives I've had to say. And that's probably the most frustrating thing about the internet, is I can say as many positive things about someone, but a few honest pieces of insight or even just opinion. I'm not an expert. I've told you from day one, everybody, I've said a lot of what I'm telling you is just what the music makes me feel. And I try to apply social construct and history and personality to help understand what a player is saying. And when you factor in the brushstrokes of environment, their experience within that environment, and their personality within an environment, it does tell you something about what that player is emoting. And I think sometimes I forget to explain some of that part to newer viewers. And there's a lot of things I share that were feelings I had that have been validated for me by numerous people in the know. First and foremost, my friend Jean-Michel Riester-Beethoven, he's from Switzerland. He booked many jazz shows, events, some tours, big festivals in Europe. He knew personally Count Basie and Ray Brown and just a litany of the greats. He's met almost all of them. And the stories he's told me, and the times where he's messaged me and said, that's exactly what those players said to me, it's as secondhand information as I can give you. And what someone says in an interview is not the same as what someone says to a personal friend like Jean-Michel. And trust me when I say the black players did have a lot of things to say about white musicians and about the exploitation and about the situation back in America. And so I was empowered by some of that recognition from him, that validation from him. And so maybe I allowed my opinions to sound like concrete fact, but I've always said that most of this is just how I feel. And Miles' personality to me, when he's speaking through his horn, it doesn't sound like he likes me. It sounds like he's saying, "Fuck you, white boy. Spend your money on my music. I don't give a shit. Spend your money on my music. I'm not even gonna look at you." I don't know how you can listen to him and not feel some of that if you're trying to think about what a player's expressing and emoting. And for me, that's how jazz changed. Jazz for me was very much about the virtuosity and the playing and the musicality of it. And like I've shared before, there was one day where it kind of switched, and I felt a Lee Morgan riff on Coltrane's album that really made me go, oh, he's actually just telling you how he feels right now in the moment. That's what he's kind of doing. And when you reevaluate playing from that perspective, it does change what every player is saying and emoting. It's not just a musical expression, it's a personal expression of my emotional state. And Coltrane's personality impacts everything he plays, and Miles' personality impacts everything he plays. And that's not me being negative or disliking Miles. I think he's a super important part of the fabric. He's not heads and shoulders above the entire jazz universe, as the modern day collector would possibly think. He's got such a bigger name than anybody else at this point, and it's a real disservice to all the other people who contributed just as much to this music as he did. And as I've said before in comments to people, I don't think in 1955 anybody polling in the jazz community, if they were asked in 65 years who will be the most famous name in jazz, I don't think anybody in 1955 would have been like, Miles Davis, he's going to be the guy. You know, Ellington, Armstrong, Parker, there's probably a lot of names that people would have thrown out there in 1955. And Miles certainly ascends, but I don't think we can make any debate as to how much Columbia paid dividends in his popularity, his distribution, his still being publicized by that same marketing department today. His name's never left the lips of people's mouths because he's always in people's ears, because Columbia's always issuing some new box sets, some new live CD. And I don't mean to diminish Miles' importance. He's an important cat. He was a very emotional player. He was very instrumental at taking the innovations that were happening in jazz around him and publicizing that to the masses. And in doing so, he's often gotten credit for a lot of that innovation, which that I think is unfair. But people hear me say that and think I'm dissing him. And I think Miles would admit that a lot of his innovations were coming through other places. He wasn't being the invention behind the second great quintet. Shorter and Company and Hancock, they definitely were. And Miles initially dismissed the avant-garde. And then when he brings Shorter in, it's not like we could say Miles was the one innovating that. Miles openly admits Bill Evans came to him because he needed someone who could play modal, and Miles knew that he was doing that with George Russell, and Russell was the guy who was behind that. Miles knew. Miles knows Bristol the Cool, how important Mulligan was in those sessions. Miles wasn't going to necessarily openly say, I'm going to take credit for all this stuff, but he was certainly given the credit. And Columbia having the marketing power that it is, it's just put more light on him than he deserves. And I want someone with the body of work that I have to debate me on this. You know, I mean, have the labels almost completed that I do from across the country from this time frame, and look at all the different players and how many different faces there were to this music. And I think if you have that body of work, it shifts how you see all of it. And so all I'm trying to say is love of jazz is the most important thing. And I don't want to ever turn anybody off jazz. I don't want to ever dismiss someone for having spent $200 on an avant-garde record that I would never pay $10 for. It's great that you did. I hope that you really like it and that you didn't just take some other guy's word for it because he was proud to find it because it was rare. Rare and great aren't synonymous. And there's a lot of great jazz you can get for $5-10 that no one gives a shit about because no one's reviewing it, no one's praising it, no one's putting light on it every day. So again, the avant-garde, I don't hate it. I just hate how people make it sound like it's essential. Like you have to like this or else you're not a jazz. No, that's fucking bullshit. You don't have to like it at all. You can dislike it because most of the jazz community did and no one bought it. So you're normal if you don't like a lot of that stuff. That's not to say that The Egg by Hancock's not fantastic. You know, Groucho and Encore ain't fantastic. There's a lot of stuff I really like. But you get to screeching and honking for too long, I'm out. Nowadays, I'm 48. I ain't got time for it no more. So the internet's a weird place. People take away from things what they want to hear. A lot of people just want to have the argument or the debate and come away from something going, oh, dismiss that guy. And if you dismiss what I have to say, that's your prerogative. But there's a lot of good information here, some good insight here, a lot of validated stuff that I've talked to some important people about. And most importantly, there's a large body of work here that I'm sharing from. I'm not just throwing stuff out there. I have a large perspective from which to look at things. And so Love of Jazz is what I really wanted to talk about. What we're listening to right now is a pretty rare record. Terry Pollard. She was a piano player and a vibraphone player. She's a really great little player. Doesn't have a lot of stuff as a leader. This is a Bethlehem 10-inch B1015 cool cover once again. Burt Goldblatt, I'm almost certain. Yep. Don Fagerquist is on this, if I recall. Howard Roberts is on the guitar. Herman Wright's on the bass. Frank DeVito on the drums. So it's East Coast Bethlehem. She actually composes a few of the pieces on here. A lot of the other ones are standards. They do Parker Stample from the Apple. They do Rodgers and Hart, Where or When. Fedge is a Pollard tune. But she's a great little piano player, a great vibraphone player. She appears quite a lot as a sideman in projects here and there, but she's really kind of fallen into obscurity. She's not someone that most people know anything about. I saw her name a few times as a side session worker, but it was really the Bethlehem discography that turned me on to her, and she's fantastic. As you can hear right there, she can play her butt off, and she played with the fellows along with the best of them. Another record we're going to cover today, one of the great records in the jazz canon. It's John Coltrane's My Favorite Things. And this is an interesting version of Summertime. This leads off side 2, of course. And Summertime is generally brought to us in a very melancholy, down-tempo, minimal kind of way. And I guess the same could go for My Favorite Things. Coltrane really splashes extra light and color all over it. It's quite a bold reinvention of both those tracks. My Favorite Things, of course, is the sweet little candy number from The Sound of Music, and most people know it from The Holidays, and it's such a kind of saccharine piece. And Coltrane on the other side, 10-12 minutes long, isn't it? Throws thunder all throughout that track. It's 13:41. And Summertime's long too. This is 11:31. It's only 4 tracks, and they're all, every time we say goodbye it's 5:40. The other ones are all pretty long, 10, 12, 13 minutes. Tommy Flanagan, I believe, is on some of this. It's actually McCoy Tyner, it says. Interesting. Steve Davis on the bass, Elvin drums. And then he's on the soprano sax on My Favorite Things. Why do I think Flanagan was on this? Probably because he's on Giant Steps. But so McCoy Tyner's already on board here. The soprano sax, of course, is that straight horn that he's playing there, that he really kind of puts a lot of light on. Sidney Bechet played it a lot back in the 30s and 40s, but Coltrane kind of brings it back in a way. Steve Lacy plays it, a few other cats play it. I think Jimmy Giuffre plays it quite a bit. And other cats play it as well, of course, like Giuffre Thesis will dabble in it. But the soprano's an interesting instrument, and it kind of is a little throatier than a clarinet. A clarinet and a soprano saxophone seem to fill a similar octave and a range. But I think the soprano saxophone, like I said, it's a little throatier, a little reedier. The clarinet and the alto do sound fairly similar, and I think the person playing it can reflect a lot of their personality into. And I think that's true for most of the reed horns. The reed horn really allows your breathiness, your embouchure, your style to permeate. But I suppose the trumpet and that brass mouthpiece is the same thing. It's crazy how different trumpet players can sound, and how different the tone of a Miles Davis is from a Clifford Brown. So even the range in instruments in jazz, it's just insane how differently the same instrument can be approached from different eras and different. Even the saxophone is a fairly marginal instrument up until about 1935, and Coleman Hawkins is already starting to establish it, but it starts to become more and more prominent during the swing era with swing composition and arrangements. But as a lead instrument, Hawkins really kind of defines it. Ben Webster, Illinois Jack Head kind of helped define it as well. But the saxophone definitely steps into the limelight in the 50s and 60s and kind of takes over. But Coltrane's here is in an interesting place. You know, he's done his time with Miles. He does come back for a little bit in 60, 61 to work on Someday My Prince Will Come. But he's kind of in that transitional phase. He's no longer going to be a sideman. Those days are done. His prestige Sheets of Sound era is kind of behind him, and he's moving into the new sound. And he wants to explore. He's explored the past, from playing rhythm and blues with Earl Bostic, playing with Benny Golson in Philadelphia. He's played in big band ensembles. He's played with the hard bop sound with the Miles Quintet, and all those great prestige sessions where he's just blowing his ass off, discovering his horn. And most cats rehearse and then do a take. A lot of times it feels like Coltrane's still practicing when he's doing takes. He's still learning his instrument. He's still exploring ideologies. And you don't get that from a lot of players. A lot of players don't really experiment on the recordings. They keep that for the rehearsal times. And you can feel Coltrane seeking always. He's always searching for that new sound, that new structure of chords and arrangement of notes and rhythmic approaches. And so he's in that kind of bridge here between where he's going to be at Impulse in the mid-60s and where he was as a sideman in the 50s. And at Atlantic, he's given kind of rein to be very creative, and there's not a lot of constriction. And it certainly feels like the Artigan brothers at Atlantic give Coltrane a little bit more room to polish and produce the session. It may not have the refinement of the Impulse sessions, but they certainly seem more rehearsed than what he's doing at Prestige. They certainly feel more conjoined. The albums feel like they have a cohesive feel and idea behind them. Giant Steps has a lot of ferocity. It just feels unified. Olé has that feel to it. So Atlantic seems to be giving him a little bit more room to put his stamp on things. And then, of course, he moves on to Impulse, where he gets free reign, carte blanche, and really all the fetters come off. He becomes pretty free to go anywhere he wants. But the Atlantic years for Coltrane are very important. The album with Milt Jackson, I think, is a wonderful session. It kind of reminds Coltrane about the blues and about the guts of this music. And Coltrane never seems to want to get too far away from remembering the roots of the music. As far out as he goes, you feel like he's still connected to that nose, that's the heart and soul of it. But his version of My Favorite Things, of course, is a pretty seminal track. It's something that your girlfriend's going to be like, oh, I heard this at Borders Books the other day. I like this song. And there's an edited version, of course, a single that's shorter that they're going to be more familiar with. But this full extended version of this, first of all, it's a great melody. It just is a wonderful, haunting, gripping, sticky collection of notes that once you hear it, it just kind of ingrains itself in your head, and you can almost walk around do. Like it's almost got a droning, hypnotizing pulse to it that's fairly fascinating. Richard Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote it. That's what I thought it was, but I wasn't sure. So it's part of the Great American Songbook, of course. It's really a record that I think anybody in jazz should have a chance to get. It wouldn't be one of my first Coltrane's to buy, but once you're ready to really get to dive in, to get to know the guy a little bit, I would buy this before I'd buy any of his Prestige titles. I would buy this before I'd buy really any of his Impulse titles, except for maybe Ballads, Johnny Hartman, Duke Ellington, those 3 records, and then probably Blue Train would be one of the top 5 I would buy. But then this would probably be 5 or 6 along with Giant Steps at Atlantic. So it's a very important record, and it's also very important because the success of My Favorite Things, and it was a pretty big crossover song. It was pretty well played and distributed, and it certainly was what piqued Creed Taylor's interest at Impulse into signing this guy. He played with Miles. He's got the pedigree. He had success at Atlantic with My Favorite Things. I don't think Creed Taylor was expecting Coltrane to go where he did, but that's the mission of these guys. That's the mission he was on. It's a fantastic record. The other two tracks, of course, are But Not For Me and Every Time We Say Goodbye, both standards, Gershwin and Cole Porter. It's not that tough a record to find. There's a lot of different pressings of it out there, and there's probably some even modern reissues that are out there available for a decent price. Not something you should spend hundreds of dollars for, and I don't think the old Atlantic should really ever go for that much. There are too many out there, and a lot of different editions of it. It's something you should probably spend $50 tops on, but it's definitely worth having, and it's a great piece of jazz royalty, a big part of the jazz canon. And the other record I want to talk about today was this Jimmy Giuffre record. And Jimmy Giuffre is a West Coast cat. Jimmy Giuffre's a West Coast guy. You know, he's working in the whole West Coast scene. And he's a very innovative writer, arranger, composer, and a fine player, and clarinet, saxophone. I think he plays the flute at times. This is with Paul Bly, the great Canadian pianist, and Steve Swallows on the bass. So it's just the three of them. And it's a pastel avant-garde is what it is. It's not driven by big brassy horns, so it's not going to slap you across the face and choke the life out of you, but there's a lot of edge. If you listen to this, it's very edgy, angled. The pieces of the fabric are very stitched together. Giuffre's just minimal at times and then very extroverted at times. Bly's blocking some stuff in like Monk almost, and then doing some kind of delicate Cecil Taylor-like stuff. Steve Swallows laying down patterns and splotching in the bass colors. It's a pretty cool record. He doesn't get enough credit for being the avant-gardist that he is. He's doing this really before a lot of what's happening in the avant-garde happens. It's sophisticated, it's posh. You could almost use a monocle to listen to it because of just the associations with pop culture. But and it's not super driven by the blues. It's not super driven by groove. It's more color pastiche, and it's just little shades of color and emotion and feeling. And Giuffre was a very in-demand guy. He arranged a lot of important records, and his compositions were always kind of in demand. And guys who played the blues enjoyed sometimes tackling Giuffre's arrangements. Sonny Stitt tackles Giuffre's stuff, you know. Jimmy Giuffre's an interesting cat, and I think he goes a little bit under the radar for collectors today. His stuff on Atlantic's really interesting. His stuff on Verve is fantastic. This Thesis record is pretty tough to find nowadays, and it's becoming pretty expensive. And it's number 8402, if I'm reading that right. And it's recorded in '61 in New York, and it's Creed Taylor. Creed Taylor's only been at Verve for maybe a few months at this point, so this is pretty early in the Creed Taylor transition of the Verve sound. The old sound of the classic swing guys and their small groups that was being recorded in the 50s. Creed Taylor dismisses almost all of that. I think Basie stays and Johnny Hodges stays. Dizzy Gillespie is kind of more of a transition guy anyway. But a lot of the other guys are kind of let go. And it's Verve tackles some new stuff. from Evans to Jimmy Smith to Wes Montgomery to stuff like Jimmy Giuffre here to Kai Winding to Cal Jader. There's all these diverse things happening in the 60s, and this is as far out really as Verve goes. It's a pretty interesting session. It sounds a bit like film score at times, which I think that's what the avant-garde does. It takes me away from thinking about social issues and the blues and even the black experience, and this becomes more the setting of Tom and Jerry, a noir film. It definitely gives you a different feel. And again, it comes down to feeling. You know, it comes down to what does the music make you feel. And when you picture the music you're listening to and try to imagine the setting of the film that this is in, this could be an interesting spy film set in Paris. And the gal is being hunted by the bad guy, and she's quietly stalking through the apartment. The shadows are and the doors are creaking. The noir, black and white, is creating this kind of contrast between the light and the dark and the evil. And avant-garde does that. It becomes cinematic in what I feel, what I see, what I think, and what I hear. And blues-driven, R&B-driven jazz never takes me into those kind of contexts. I never once listened to a Lockjaw Davis record or a Count Basie record and pictured this type of a fire escape noir street lamp Naked City kind of vibe. I listen to Lockjaw Davis, I think about Black Church on Sunday. How are we going to get together? There's going to be some good food there, and we're going to have a good time. Because that's the different place that it's coming from. And again, I think people need to stop taking the one thing I say that they don't agree with and start understanding the most important principle here is what does the music make you feel? That's what's most important. And I think when you start to tackle that music from that message, from that place, all the things I say make more sense. They fall into place. So again, that's an important step in the process, is being able to close your eyes, imagine, picture what you're hearing. Put images to this setting. And once you do that, that's interesting, but it's not the blues. It's complex, it's edgy, it's mysterious. On some level, it's almost not even jazz. It's not really swinging, but it's still brilliant. And so, again, bottom line is love jazz. And you don't have to agree with everything I say. I'm completely fine with that. A lot of it, I'm not claiming to be an expert. I'm telling you what I honestly feel, how I honestly think, and I'm going to express and emote what the music's putting into my heart, soul, and mind. And for some people, those expressions either might make them uncomfortable or might contradict some of what they think and feel and believe, and I'm fine with that. Especially if you think you've actually sat through and listened to it from a feeling standpoint and you have a completely different take. That's great. That's what art does. But if you've just listened to your record because it's cost $200 and some other guy told you it was an important record because it's hard to find, that's not the right layer to be listening to it. Listen to what it makes you feel and how do you enjoy what it makes you feel. You know, do you enjoy the place it's putting you? And honestly, this Jimmy Giuffre, it's brilliant, but I wouldn't listen to it too often. It's mysterious, but life has plenty of mystery already, plenty of unknowns. I like the celebration of the blues. I like the overcoming nature of that black expression saying, you know what, in spite of all this, tonight I'm going to have a good time. Because life is hard. Life's full of sorrow. Life's full of struggle. My mom's struggling with some health issues right now. Life has issues that always kind of weigh on you. And the blues and jazz that's driven by the blues is about healing. And again, that's what I've always tried to get across. I mean, I haven't always expressed that well. But, so number one, I don't hate the avant-garde. Just don't feel like you have to love it. Two, I definitely don't hate Miles Davis. He's a super important cat. I just don't think he's as important as the modern day collector sees him. And three, you don't have to agree with everything I say, but don't dismiss the challenge, because there's other good nuggets in here to be gleaned. And like I said, a lot of the things I have shared, how I feel, I have had validated by numerous people in the black community who thank me for saying things that are difficult for a black man to say. They appreciate the fact that a white guy is saying some of the things that I'm saying. And I've also had validated by numerous white guys who were in the business, knew the players, and heard the stories firsthand. And so maybe it's not been a first-hand interaction with them, but I have plenty of second-hand, knowledgeable people around me who I share with and talk with, who think my channel is important because I'm saying some of the things that aren't being said. I'm sharing some of the opinions and the history that's not being shared. And it might make some of us uncomfortable sometimes, but it's the facts, it's the truth, it's the history of it. It's the sorrow that this came out of. And people who are very in the jazz community value and thank me for the things I say. People who knew dozens, if not hundreds of jazz musicians validate what I've said. And so you can disagree with me, but know that people who know a lot of people have told me that I'm right on the mark with a lot of it. Right on the mark. And so, I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but it discourages me at times how I feel like people miss what I'm trying to say. And I don't want people to think I'm trying to be negative, and I certainly don't want to drive anyone away from the music. You couldn't listen to that, though, and tell me a bunch of black guys were playing the blues. You know what I mean? It's pretty clearly white cats doing all that. Pretty clear. Anyway, it's all love. It's all a love affair, guys. Jazz is so important. I love it so much. It's such an important part of my life. And I try to share that with you guys with honesty and with passion. And maybe sometimes I go on tangents that aren't necessarily in everybody's book of how things should be. But I come from my own honest place. And I'm not going to blow sunshine on people. I'm not going to praise things I don't feel that praise for. I'm going to say how I honestly feel. And I think that has some value. So I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for all your Patreon support. People who bought merchandise at the Teespring page, thank you so much. I want to send another thank you to Ken McAuliffe for all his help and support through all this. He's been such a vital sounding board for me, and it's given me a lot of great insight and validation. Jean-Michel Reisser Beethoven, you've been a huge factor as well for me, and our conversations are so vital and valuable. I enjoy, some days we talk for hours and just talk about jazz stories and jazz people he knew, and I want to start sharing more of his stories with you guys. I just haven't figured out a really great way to do it yet. I was trying to do it through the Patreon and through the Jazz Journal, but that's grown so slowly that I think I might try to find another way to bring that stuff to you guys, because he knows so much, and he speaks with a pretty heavy French accent at times, which makes it a little tougher, I think, for some people to follow. But maybe if I put subtitles in there somehow, or just typed in what he was saying, I think most people can understand him. You know, I don't have a problem really. But thank you guys. You've been huge and supporting me. And it's funny how when I kind of get discouraged or feel like, why am I spending so much time and effort on this, almost always someone will message me that day and give me a little nugget of encouragement and strength and support. And Jean-Michel, that was you yesterday. Thank you very much. So anyway, appreciate you all. And everybody else out there who I talk to on the regular, Sven Van Hooydonk, appreciate all your help. with the t-shirts and designs and our conversations. The guys are helping me on the Facebook group. Thank you so much. There's a lot of people who've been very instrumental helping me and supporting me, and just being sounding boards. Wolfgang Pointer, my Austrian friend, you are a valuable asset to me as well. You also have met so many great guys, and I appreciate talking with you. You're another guy who's brought some stuff to the channel and the Patreon page, and we need to figure out how to get that stuff out there to more people. So I'm going to sign off for now, but thank you to all those people and everybody else who supports, watches, checks in. It's great that as many people care about jazz as they do, and it's great that the channel's grown as much as it has. I want to say one last thank you to Stephen DiCarlo, who stopped by the other day. We had to hang out with Mass, but we sat and talked jazz for an hour. It was nice having a little visit with my friend from DC. Jazz is universal. It speaks to everybody, and it speaks regardless of language. It speaks to people, and it's such a beautiful gift. And I'm happy that I get to be a part of it and share my take on it and share how it makes me feel. And from my musical background as a DJ and as a musician, and then I see how jazz, how uniquely it cuts through the veil. Words don't cut through the same way Emoting from My Soul does. Jazz cuts through the veil and gets to the heart of the matter and says things that rock and roll and R&B, for all its words, can never quite say with as much integrity and sincerity. And I don't have to look over my shoulder wondering what someone's going to think of these words. I'm saying them in a coded message. But if you get to know me and my personality and the situation I live in and the environment I come from, you're going to end up hearing what I'm trying to tell you. And that takes us going to the musician, getting to know about them some, and then being able to hear if you listen to Mingus and don't hear how angry he is, I'm confused. Mingus is an angry guy. Personality inflects on musicians. Experience is a big part of what they're sharing with us. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up today. We'll talk to you all soon. Working on the building. Like I said, we got the heat in. See that heat duct up there? It's warm in here now. I don't got to wear a hoodie and bundle up. I ain't afraid of sitting here for an hour and have my fingers go numb. Minnesota. I don't know why I live in Minnesota sometimes, but it is what it is. Y'all be safe. Peace.